we on the Éarte.
I've heard month after month that it happens on the first week, like Tuesday of the month. So all signs indicate yes.
If it has been prophesied, so has it come to pass, because that is the name of our show. Welcome to On the Éarte. I am Sam de Leve, and this is our Children of Éarte after show, where I steal spoilers from our guests like so many mint copies of Action Comics #1. And at last, I have managed to capture for this after show the glorious, the notorious, the one and only Adam Bradford, aka Silas Jordan, aka Silas Sorrell, aka DB Cooper, maybe. Probably. Maybe. Thank you for joining me today,
No,
Adam.
he was just a friend.
Please introduce yourself and your many, many aliases.
Yeah, so I am Adam Bradford. I am the Chief Development Officer at Demiplane. That is what I currently do, and that is the made-up title. So, if anyone is wondering out there, I think that they typically use that most frequently in construction work. CDO is something that happens, in New York when they're doing these massive, complex things. But I think maybe it's a little fitting because we're making some pretty complex things here at Demiplane. And when we thought about all the things that would be falling under the umbrella, that was the one that seemed like it covered the most ground. So we ended up going with CDO, formerly VP of Tabletop Gaming at Fandom, where I founded D&D Beyond. And so I've been doing some digital tool set stuff for many years here, and also have been able to stream quite a bit across the last several years, and have been playing games with a variety of incredible people. And I've made lasting friendships, and the group that is most near and dear to my heart is the group that we're currently playing with here with Children of Éarte. I've played with them now for, I guess going on 4 years. And it's just been such a blast to play with them. A little bit, else about me. Favorite color is gray. Zodiac sign in real life is Aries, actually. It's Silas's as well. And let's see, what else can I say? I am a collector, so you can see blurred out behind me. If I ducked my head, you would see with clarity, and we would probably get some kind of copyright strike. But blurred out behind me, lots and lots of goodies that I do collect with absolute glee. I am a fan of many things, including sports. So congratulations to Aaron Judge tonight. He broke the AL home run record at 62. So good job, Aaron Judge. But yeah, fan of a lot of those different things. That is me in a nutshell.
And we, in turn, are a fan of you. My favorite thing about people with made-up titles is that they almost always occur because we want this particular person, and we'll figure out the rest later. But before we can talk about Adam, and possibly about Adam's crimes, sorry, Silas's crimes.
Yeah, let's not get Adam in trouble here tonight.
The FBI compels me to mention our sponsors. Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, we're giving away 2 codes. You can type code in chat for a free Electrum chest in-game. We have Die Hard Dice, purveyors of clicky-clacky math rocks for the dice goblin in your life. Use code Éarte at checkout for a 10% discount. We will be doing a giveaway in chat during the stream, and Sirenscape, because epic games require epic music. And with these questions satisfied for our federal investigative agencies, on with our show with one reminder: you too can ask Adam questions like, does one really make a better living from stealing and fencing comics than from actually writing them? By asking your question with question
That
in
is
all
the real
caps
crime.
in chat. But unfortunately, I think you all will find I've appropriated the first questions for myself, and I plan to use them and all the others for nefarious purposes. So, we have Silas, a resident nerd, played by Adam, a resident nerd, put in a particularly good position to play a genre-savvy character, the first one in this campaign to mention Dungeons or Dragons, and an audience proxy for this audience who, I have it on good authority, are nerds. So how did you develop him, and what made you want to play that flavor of character?
Yeah, wow, you're just starting off with the ones that I could probably talk for 3 or 4 hours about, but
Mhm.
I'll try to be
Mhm.
brief. Yeah, so Silas came about because often in games over the years, I am the forever game master. So most of the time when I have played across the last 30 plus years, I guess at this point that I've been involved in the hobby, it is running games. And so most of the time I am experiencing the wonder of the characters going through something secondhand, and I know that the twists are going to come, not necessarily all of them, because obviously it's collaborative but I've got a decent direction of where things are headed typically. And so I really wanted with Silas to play a character that maybe could experience some of that wonder that I, especially when I was a kid, massive fans of Chronicles of Narnia. And that concept, I used to, anytime I would, this is 6, 7 year old Adam, anytime he would go to a new place, he would find the different types, and of course, it probably was not wardrobes. I don't even know if young Adam, knew what a wardrobe really was, but any kind of cabinet that might possibly fit him, he was he was tearing them open. People used to wonder, what are you doing, kid? And I would be, thinking that I was going to make it into a magical world. And so I think when I get the chance to play an actual character, much of the time I'm going to let sit back, let everyone pick their character and what they want to be, and then I'm going to say, hey, I'll be whatever the group needs. Or again, because I game master so much, it's like I'm going to be a character that is going to just be a foil, or it's going to be some kind of archetype that is going to make the story better overall, some of the parts kind of thing. But with Silas, I really wanted to just really lean into that wonder and that excitement as much as I could. And so he geeks out all the time, regularly, and that is an extension of, honestly, that's definitely something pretty personal I put into that. Like I said, fan of many things. I'm watching things constantly. I've got a TV right here, and all this stuff, and I geek out in that same kind of way. And so that was going to be typically with a character. I want some kind of touch point, something that feels familiar to me, for that to kind of be the foundation that I can jump off of, and then make some intentional differences, with the character and me as Adam. And so I think that the touch point for Silas was just that ability to geek out, that ability to experience wonder, and get really excited and passionate about things.
Aw. So I know not everyone has the privilege of knowing the Adam Bradford, and especially with that kind of character, those without such privilege may not know where Silas ends and Adam begins. So, which aspects of Silas are absolutely nothing like Adam?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I actually appreciate the chance to maybe clarify that a little bit here in front of everyone. I am not Silas Jordan. I am not Silas Jordan. I ran into this to some degree with the former character that I played with much of this same group in Heroes of the Plains, and when we were playing on D&D Beyond's channels, Briv Steelmarrow. And so, I played that character for years. I adored playing Briv. It was so much fun, but Briv very much was not me, and it was very intentionally, doing something very different than I was. I think that when I look back on Briv, the touch point that was familiar with me, was just his chaotic bent, because especially when I play these games, I like the chaos. And so Briv was just an instigator and possibly an aggravator. And so you can ask my kids, I will certainly aggravate to no end. And so that was kind of the touch point. But at the end of the day, Briv was kind of horrible a lot of the time, and the inspirations for that character were, somebody like Jane from Firefly, or and so Jane is not a character that you're thinking to yourself, oh, he is a model citizen. And so that kind of approach, sometimes I saw through the transference that happens with these games. Sometimes people would be like, oh wow, Adam, that guy is such an asshole, I'm like, no, I promise you I'm playing a character. And I understand that in many, especially if you're playing pickup games with people out there, please don't play those kind of characters, because it's going to be hard for people to have that social contract in place when you're doing that. But with the group that we are playing with here, we discuss all of these character options. We discuss what's going on. There's a level of trust that we've built up over the years. And so it's like, hey, I'm going to lean into this, and I think it's going to make the story better, and everyone really is game to try that out. And so in a similar way, I think Silas, definitely that wonder and that passion is something that is pretty familiar to me, in this real world. But he is condescending. He's cynical sometimes about things. Those are not things that describe me, and those are intentional choices. Again, it's like, I think a lot of people come together to play these games, and they think that everyone wants to be Frodo Baggins, and they everyone wants to be at the center of the hero's journey, when they come together. And I've found over the years that when you get a group of people, especially if you're going to stream the show, who are willing to play the different archetypes outside of the hero that is answering that call to adventure and going through the thresholds and all those kind of things, I think that just makes a richer story. And so that really was the intent for Silas, was, one part, what you alluded to earlier, audience proxy. So it's perfectly on brand and perfectly fine for Silas to say, this is like a video game. We should watch this like this video game, or wow, this is so close to what I played in that D&D game, and that allows for a little bit of the fourth wall breaking, which I love to do just in general, but it allows for that, and it allows for him to say things that the audience is often thinking. But then the other part of that is it allows him to start in a place and grow over time. And so I'm thinking things like Han Solo, like those are the archetypes that we're talking about. He didn't go on a heroic journey, but he was a scoundrel and possibly a punk that people really couldn't like too much. And then he does over time get that proverbial heart of gold. And so playing those kinds of paths and those kind of journeys, and these kind of stories is really appealing to me.
Han Solo is such a good pull, and you heard it here first, chat. Everything charming about Silas is Adam. Every negative character trait, those are all Silas. Those are all Silas.
Everything. I will
0%
always blame it on Silas 100% of the time. That's it.
Absolutely. But bringing in all of that genre savvy and Kool-Aid Manning through the fourth wall, how do you
Oh
balance
yeah.
that with a healthy respect for the metagame? Sometimes it can serve a narrative, but how do you figure, okay, that's a bit too much?
Yeah. Honestly, being perfectly honest, I think that I navigate that well most of the time, but it probably does not land exactly where it should, always. And so that is, that is the beauty and the scariness sometimes, but also just the gloriousness of these kind of games is, again, especially if you're playing with a group of people who you love and have trust with, and you're okay to explore some of those boundaries. Some of those risks that you take and some of those decisions that you make aren't always going to land the way that, especially that you intended them, but sometimes the way that you think they're going to, and like the way that you think people will receive them. And so I think that there are times where it doesn't quite hit like that, but I think that the main thing is that we're playing with a group here that even if Silas is flat out metagaming, and he ends up breaking that fourth wall and he says, yeah, I think an owlbear typically has this many hit points, and like all of those things. The great thing about it is that Deborah takes everything and turns it on its head. And so the genuine truth, we've talked about this with the players, we don't actually know what's going on, because it's like, hey, we're outside this cave, and if you're watching this, you're probably getting spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, probably catch this a little later after you catch up. But we're in this cave, and there are I think ice methods is what Adam would guess. Like I think that's probably what those were, but they didn't necessarily behave exactly like an ice method would behave. And so I think at the end of the day, she really is doing this wonderful thing of thinking about what works the best in this world that she's laying out in front of us. And from there, it makes it almost impossible to metagame, at least in an accurate way, right? And so it's like, even if you hear Silas saying things and Adam's winking at the camera as it happens, as a viewer, know that Adam is completely in the dark and doesn't actually know what's about to happen, even if it kind of comes across that way sometimes.
And the truth is, if Deborah keeps you in the dark and you don't, as Adam doesn't, have dark vision in your stat block, then you can play to the top of your own intelligence and never really harm. There's no harm that could be done. You're not
Yeah.
going to reveal something you shouldn't know because you don't know it.
That's exactly right. And again, like I think Silas, that this is part of that personality that I am putting on for that character. He may act like he knows, but he doesn't actually know. And so I think even as a player, this is something that we talk about all the time. After playing these games in this hobby for so many years, I continue to be amazed at how much I still love it after all this time. And I'm getting old, and but it's like every time I come to play, whether it is with my kids or with this group that we play here weekly like this, I am having a blast. And I think one of the reasons for that is just this idea that it is improvisation, that it's like, even if you are going through a written adventure that theoretically is on the rails, there are the opportunities within that to make those changes, and there are the opportunities for something that another player does to completely bust it wide open, and for that to go in an entirely different direction. And so I think that, especially with this group and with what's going on with Silas, with us as players, we genuinely have no idea. I am a showrunner for what we're doing here, and I'm also playing in it, and I don't know where this is going. I have the broad strokes of what the concept of the show is, and from there, just put some trust in Deborah that she is going to lay out a world, and then put trust in the other players that they are going to inhabit it in a way that is going to bring it to life in a really unique way. And I think 20 something episodes in, that has been happening, and I love being in the dark about that, even if Silas acts like he's not.
Lord grant me the confidence of Silas Jordan, aka Silas Sorrell, aka DB Cooper, maybe, probably, maybe.
No, he was just a friend. He was just a friend. Yeah.
Just a friend.
No, I don't actually even know. I don't think Silas is that old. I would have to. I don't know what DB Cooper's, but in that vein. So yeah, there were lots of inspirations. I've already talked, from an arc perspective, definitely love the Han Solo kind of thing. But I think that probably the closest. I just asked myself a question, by the way. So sorry, I'm just going with this real quick about
Doing crime.
inspirations for the character. But I do think that probably the chief inspiration is probably like a Scott Lang. So our beloved Ant-Man, and just that idea of, again, some swagger involved in what is going on, but does he deserve the swagger? And always, because sometimes things are incredible and things go incredibly well, but there's a self-deprecation to it. And there's definitely, if it's not self, it's a deprecation to it. And so, like, I think that Scott Lang, the astonishing Ant-Man is probably, I would say, kind of the chief bit that I put into my Play-Doh smasher thing, probably for Silas, but definitely some Han Solo inspiration, a little bit of Star-Lord, but not the part that's going to let Thanos continue to take over the universe, not that part of Star-Lord. But definitely the idea that there was a comic series, and here we go, but I'm going there. There was a comic series that took place, that we'll see if the new Avengers movies here in a couple of years go this route. But Star-Lord was actually in a different kind of universe, and he was stuck there, and he became a lounge singer. So he was a lounge singer, and he actually sang Disney songs, but nobody knew what the songs were. So, that kind of concept of singing and basically constantly having your own theme music going in your head, that's definitely another part that I put into the Play-Doh smasher for Silas.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I love when people have a mechanical profession that provides vocal inspiration, shall we say? Because it's such a wonderful opportunity to discover that someone low key, secretly had a lovely singing voice this whole time. So, how do you choose the songs that get us and your party grooving?
Honestly, most of the time. So let's be clear. Adam is would probably be singing 10 times more than Silas is in the show, but it's like this is not a musical, and Adam is not the star of the show. So I have to dial that back. Actually, I probably would end up singing almost everything that Silas says, but I try to keep it in check. Probably have not succeeded very well, but yeah, I really do. Music is something that I've said this before, I think somewhere else on a stream somewhere, but it's like when I saw the Miss Marvel Disney show, Plus show, and I saw all of the artwork blasting around, and just the way that her daydreams manifested to that degree, that is something that it's going to sound so silly, but I felt kind of seen in that moment. Like, I've tried to explain that to my family over the years and everything else, and I've never been able. And then I was finally like, it's kind of like that, and I'm trying to like show them in the show, because I constantly, one of the things over the years that I've struggled with and I've had to really learn how to do is how to not get distracted by the popcorn thoughts that are constantly, kind of bouncing around in my head. And so I think that, it is something, really, really core to who I am, that I am. There's constantly a song. Right now I cannot tell you why, but right now it's, I got a feeling, like Black Eyed Peas for some reason is going through my head right now, which I'm possibly a little bit embarrassed to admit, but either way, like there's constantly, kind of this bombardment of those kinds of thoughts. And so when it comes to Silas choosing the music, it really is. It's like I try to be as contextual as I possibly can be, but that is a very natural thing for Adam. And so, like, if something happens, it almost always reminds me of a song, like, right away. And then, there are so many times where it reminds me of a song, and in that moment I would blurt that out, but then this is a turn-based game often when you're in these situations. And so then I'm like, it comes back around to Silas's turn, and I'm like, ah, no, the moment's passed. Like I'm gonna hold on to that one. But it does. That part comes very very naturally, and honestly, a little bit of a secret here. I am working on some musical content that I'm going to try to get the cast involved in to some degree. So there's a tease for everybody tonight. But some musical content is going to be coming together and is going to be shared at some point. Probably, I wouldn't say it's going to be this year, because that's the kind of thing that I probably would do when I take 3 weeks off for the holiday break. Those are the kind of projects that I love jumping into. But I think some musical content is going to come at some point.
I'm very glad you say so, because Cassius asked whether the "this is not a musical" thing you just said felt like somewhere Deb just took down a note.
Maybe,
That'd be gorgeous.
perhaps. Yeah, I mean, all of the great shows have that musical episode anyway, right? And
Mhm.
so, wouldn't that be something? Now, I would say that that one would probably have to be, pre-recorded, but I would not put it outside. Many, by the way, far more talented than I am. We have many talented musicians and or singers on the cast, and so it would not surprise me in the slightest if that ended up happening at one point. A lot of what's working against us right now is just time and schedules, but once we can slay those beasts, I'm sure that so much creativity could come out in something like that.
Time and schedules. The CR20 monster of a
28, yes.
at
This is like
minimum, right?
Tiamat kind of, yes, absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Uh, all right. So speaking a little more recently, you, Adam Bradford, waited 19 metric episodes to reveal not just a bombshell of a backstory, but pretty much the whole dang bomb. So, what made you feel like it was the right time to drop that big twist upon us, riding it like so much Doctor Strangelove yeehaw?
Yeah, I think that ultimately I started thinking through again. I do, to try to get in the headspace a little bit. I will sometimes, and again, this sounds pretty silly, but these are the things that some of us streamers do. But I will watch some clips of Scott Lang, before my buddy Paul Rudd. And so he's not actually my buddy, but I wish he was. But with that, as I'm watching some of this, I get in that headspace a little bit. I'm like, what would he be feeling like? Because I knew, of course, before the show started, what Silas's real name was. Knew exactly what was shaking out. Who Marion is. All of those things, right? And so it was kind of like there was this moment where I was like, like I think Silas would just blurt this out at some point, and I really did. I also thought like Silas is not a drinker, and one of the reasons that Silas is not actually a drinker is because Adam is not. Like, I cannot stand the taste of alcohol. Now, don't get me wrong, I eat a lot of food and I drink a lot of sweet tea, and so I do all kinds of unhealthy things. Let's be clear about that. But I just do not like alcohol, and so I have never been drunk. Like, I've never. So I don't have the foggiest idea of what that would actually be like. And so I'm like, I can't relate to it, and I don't want to try because it might be offensive if I try to do things that, and so basically I knew, even going into it, that it's like, hey, there are times where he's going to act like he's drinking in order to, because even in real life, when I tell people like I don't drink, like I'm out at a party or something, it's like, can I have a cherry Coke? people think it's like they don't trust me or something, and it's like no, I just really don't like it. So I
Oh,
was like,
that's because of the cherry Coke part.
the cherry coke, maybe that's it, maybe that's it. Yeah, do you have some grenadine back there? But basically with that though, I knew that there would come some point, because this group loves a long rest and a fire, and I knew that there would be some moment where somebody was going to say something that would kind of trigger, and Silas was just going to, logorrhea, like just vomit out the words, and so I can't even quite remember now, as I'm thinking about it, exactly what that thing was. But there was something that I was like, oh yeah, he would probably do it right now, because I'm thinking it's like Silas has been isolated by a large degree for 2 decades at this point. And when you have a secret that you're just dying to tell somebody about, and you go on for 2 decades, I mean, I can't even think of anything that would apply to in my own life. And so I'm like, man, this would be just burning a hole in his mind, and he's got to get this off his chest. And so I was looking for really just anything that might trigger that, found it that night. And then I was really, really happy that after all that, the other thing that was going to be a little bit of a trigger, Alicia with Fairuza just launched right into, and she's like, now, any other crimes that anybody should tell us about? Like, has anybody killed anybody? And then I'm like, well, yeah, like Silas has done that too. So I was able to, it was just like a complete avalanche of all of that kind of hitting, at one point. And that was one of the reasons that, like, after we finished that episode, no one knew that was coming. I honestly, and that, again, great thing about these improvisational games, did not know it was going to happen then and in that way. But as I was processing it, as we were talking with the cast afterwards, that was where I was like, hey, like, I've got a little bit of an idea for recording something on the phone here, like Silas would try to do. And it's a way to help the audience process all that a little bit more, and maybe normalize it slightly, that it's like, oh, like he just really wanted someone to know, because that was what it was. But in this format of playing the game, maybe that wasn't fully clear. And so the ability to kind of go back and supplement that in that way, was a really great opportunity. And we want to do more of that as we go. And so as we get to some of these other major character moments, it might not always be a video on a phone, but just supplemental content in that way to help flesh out what's going on in the story more and more.
Chat, you heard it here first from CDO of Demiplane, Adam Bradford. Normalize katana-based crime.
I feel like you might be putting some words in my mouth, but yes, okay, there we go.
I heard normalize. I heard it.
You heard it at some point and connected it. That's perfect. That's like the internet. I love it.
It's what Silas would do.
That is probably true. Yes.
The group did not know about this ahead of time. This was not a dramatic irony for them.
No, they did not know. They did not know that about Silas. And they did not know that Silas was going to say it in that episode. So yeah, it was completely out of left field for them. And honestly, I don't know what is going to happen with some of the backstories of all the characters here, but I do know that there are some fascinating things happening, just based on the way that when we're having conversations, just veiled conversations, no one's sharing the details of it, but these veiled conversations, and I can see the twinkle in everyone's eye, and just the wry grin kind of edging on the sides of their lips, all of that. I think there's going to be some great stuff, and it might not be as just volcanic as just all these weird things that happen with Silas. But I think that one of the things that I'm looking forward to is some of them are probably going to be really nuanced, and there are some important things coming out there, because now with Silas, for instance, you understand he's completely in denial even 2 decades later, but he is dealing with post trauma, like for real, and it's like exploring some of that, playing these characters. I think it's really important, and I say this all the time. I think that if everyone in the world played these games, the world would just flat out be a better place. And I think that being able to explore those kind of concepts and do that in a safe place. And by the way, we are performers, we are players. This is all improvised, and that is not always going to. We're not always going to be able to execute it perfectly and all of those things. But I think the really important thing there is that there is this intention to talk about and work through important things. And I know that even though I don't know what the specifics are for some of the other characters, I know the amount of effort that has gone into thinking through what everyone, who their characters are, what's important to them, and what's important for them to put out there. Really, some of the messaging that can happen with a show like this. And I think that this show has not, in the first 22 episodes or whatever we're on now, it has not shaken out like I thought it was going to. Really, it's pretty drastically different than I thought it was going to go. But that is not a bad thing at all. I think it's a really good thing. And I think what we've got going is something really unique. And it is a slow burn, like it absolutely is a slow burn. But that is very unlike other games that I've played in the past, where it is just kind of like wall to wall. Something's constantly happening. This slow burn is something that I wouldn't typically say that I would be just super into, but I am, and I think it's because all the players, the cast, they are just bringing it every single week, and there's just this energy that I haven't experienced before in one of these games.
I find that hard to believe because you provide so much of that energy. And for all that you talk about not executing things perfectly, improvised storytelling is kind of like parkour. You may not land the way you expected, but you move that momentum into a role and you keep it moving. And this party
I love it.
certainly does.
Wonderful metaphor. Yes, love it. Hardcore parkour.
Parkour, parkour. But since we were speaking of the cast, I wanted to pull a question from Twitter from Maverick 2. Adam, how did you pull together such an amazing cast and show?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I have been just so fortunate for the last, gosh, like 7 or 8 years at this point. I used to do something. I used to work in an industry completely unlike, the gaming industry, defense and aerospace, like NASA related things, those kinds of things, printed circuit boards. I can tell you so many boring details about electronics manufacturing. But when I came over into the gaming industry and got involved in again this hobby that I've had for all those years and started working in this industry, I really did. When I started out, I was like, I'm not going to say no to money, or anything like that, but it's like, money is not everything. Like there's so much more to life, and I want to make sure that I am doing my best to try to leave something out there. And at that point, like even at the beginning of that, I kind of resolved to myself that, look, it is not about necessarily what I can individually do and what I can go out there and create. And I have been fortunate to be able to work on some really cool things. Like it's been a blast, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it has been making space for other people that I admire and other people who are doing incredible things out there, making that space for them just to be able to continue to be themselves and be incredible and be great and be epic and awesome and all the things that they are, and just giving them that opportunity. And I will say 100% of the time in any kind of business that you're doing out there, that people talk all the time. They call them the three P's, and I don't know why they call them the three P's, because one of them is a T for technology. Sometimes it's called power, but we don't like that word. I don't like that word. So it's like people, processes, and technology is what they talk about there. And for a company to be successful, all three of those things have to be working pretty well. But over the years, I've just come to realize that the people part of that is by far the most important part of those three P's. And if you get the right people on your team, if you get the right people in a cast and just let them do their thing, this is where real magic actually starts to happen. And so with Children of Éarte, we were already playing with Heroes of the Plains with many of the same cast members here. I already saw the magic that was coming from so many special people, friends at this point. We had also been, talking with Deborah. Deborah had started running some games on Demiplane. She reached out to us one day and said, "Hey, I would like to run some games." And she was doing an incredible job with that. Many people out there who are viewers of the show probably played in some of her Cardinal adventures, and she was crafting this incredible storyline going on there. And it kind of came down to a point where I was like, hey, we're about to transition to the end of this other show. We are going to have a lot more content on Demiplane. And by the way, we still are. Like, we don't have that many shows right now. We've got big plans as we continue to introduce new games to our Nexus platform. But as we're starting that up, it's like, hey, we want to continue to work with this as much of this cast as we can. We had a couple of people moving on to other cool projects, but let's continue to work with these very special people, and then let's just see what Deborah can do. So when I was said this earlier, I was not messing around. Like, I don't actually know what's going to happen with Children of Éarte. Um, it's just giving Deborah space to build a world and giving this just incredible, amazing cast the ability and the space to work their magic week in, week out. And as I said, it hasn't gone like I would expect it to. But that is the thing when you put that kind of trust out there, that it's like, look, we're not dictating how this stuff needs to go. We're just providing the sandbox, and when you do that, and you have the right people working on the project, this is where you can get sandcastles that you never thought you would see, and that are just more unique and more beautiful than you could have ever anticipated. And over the last 7 or 8 years in this industry, I have been really privileged to be able to see that several times, and I think that that's happening again, right before our eyes here with this show.
You do such a beautiful job of not only playing a support class in character, but being a support class in real life and talking up this cast. But you realize you're part of that magic, right? I have this question from what's their name? Sam de Leve. You realize you're really, really great and a great part of this show too, right? Chat, back me up here because I'm gonna demand an answer. You get it, right?
I do appreciate that, and again, it's been an amazing, incredible ride, and I think about what's next, because I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and I have actually honestly started thinking about, like, what does retirement look like for somebody like Adam. And I am fascinated by the answers that mental Adam is giving to physical Adam. Like I really am. Like and it's kind of part of that's a little bit of the inspiration for Silas as well. I think about I've shared this in a couple of interviews, but Miss Robin, it is so inspirational to me to think about. I love the reasons that Hope has talked about for playing an older than her character, and all of those things. And I think that when I was a teenager and I was playing these games, I always wanted to play somebody in my early 20s, because for whatever reason, aspirationally, I thought that that was when it happened. That's when life really started. And I remember that when I got into my mid 20s, I started playing characters that at least started, when they're 18 or 19, Luke Skywalker esque, that they're going to go out and stare at the binary suns with the beautiful music fading in the background. And it's interesting. I didn't think about the psychology behind that at the time, but I find myself now in my 40s here, and I'm like, what am I going to play a younger character? And I find myself wanting to play older characters, and I'm trying to like psychoanalyze myself a little bit of, what's the purpose there. And I do think that some of it is that I really genuinely believe that best days are ahead. And that kind of optimism, is going to be hard to, stomp out of me. But so there is that. But I also think that there's just something to be said about this concept of things can get better, and some things will not be better, as we all get older out there. But I think there is something fascinating about continuing to engage and continuing to have that optimism about what the days ahead look like. And so I do think that, just thinking through what, it's just been a ride. Like, I really could go out tomorrow and, at the pearly gates or whatever, think just, wow, that was just such an incredible life I got to live. And so I do think that, that is so encouraging when you are able to think about it in that way, and to think about, what if one day I just want to open a restaurant, and have a pub, and a tavern, and like, Kavoth and, King Killer Chronicles, and like those are kind of dreams that, we can continue to have, and kind of reaching for those things. And so I think that, there's a lot more left with what I would love to do in this industry, and continuing to work there. But at the same time, man, it's been just such a fun ride. And, I pinch myself. When I started doing this, I used to have a bruise actually, on my wrist here, where every day driving into the office, I would pinch myself, just kind of a little ritual. And I don't do that any longer, but mentally I do it. That it really has been just a dream, and to be able to work with all of these incredible people. So if you're paying a compliment, I'm acknowledging the compliment. I appreciate that. But at the same time, like, in this game that we play, it is about that collaboration, and it's about that, the energy and synergy that is happening with everybody as they're coming there. And so all of the people I've been able to meet in these last, 7 or 8 years, it really has just improved my life in ways that I can't even explain, even though I just tried to for like 10 minutes, however long I just talked.
You kept saying, I'm thinking about retirement. I'm no spring chicken. Then you said you're in your 40s, and I want to just lovingly mush you into the dirt. But I
um,
also think that I am paying you a compliment, and this is a collaborative medium, and part of being good at it is being a good collaborator. And you are. So, compliment judo, though you might try to attempt, it turns out you're still just good at it, and there's nothing you can do about it. So,
all
we're
right.
gonna just take up another question rather than get
We'll
further
agree to disagree. No, I got it.
into the argument. No, I'm simply correct, and that's
We'll
perfectly
agree
fine. It's
to
my choice.
agree. Got it.
It's my show. Um, but we've talked a lot about the bits of Silas that are and aren't in Adam, and there are always some pieces of ourselves in our characters, because I know I could not supply so many Michael Jordan facts. So of all of the things that you could bring in to like a nerd flavored character, how did you decide to bring that piece in?
Well, so I'm gonna try to be relatively brief here, but, I so when I say that I'm a fan of many things, like, I am a sports fan. As a kid, I played basketball. I actually, no one believes this today, because I am, 100 pounds heavier and everything else. But, I used to be able to dunk a basketball, and I'm 5'11", by the way, so I'm not, tall. But I played basketball, and I ate, slept, breathed basketball, loved it. And had a chance to play in college and everything else. And I'll never forget when I went to check out the college where they were offering me the scholarship, and I shadowed the team for like a day, and they got up at 5 a.m. and hit the weight room, and basically they went through an entire day, and this was like a Tuesday. And I was like, wait, like, do you go to class? And they're like, no, we don't really have to do that. And so I had a choice at that point. Is like, well, no, I can do this other scholarship where I don't have to, like, where I can actually go to class. And so I chose that way. And I also knew that, with my size and everything else, very unlikely I would ever make it to the NBA. So my basketball career ended at that point. But I love basketball. I watch it, and I think honestly there is I like a lot of sports. Like, again, Aaron Judge. I was just jacked to see that happen tonight. I'm a huge Shohei Ohtani fan. Like, I love that guy. And so, lots and lots of stuff that is going to have a fandom and a passion, just like I would for the Lord of the Rings or for all these action figures on the shelf. And so, there are so many great things to be passionate about. And honestly, I see a lot of a dichotomy out there where people think that those two things can't coexist, and that there's some cultural, threshold that cannot be broken between loving sports and loving some of the geekier things. And again, like, I don't even necessarily like any of those labels, right? But it's like, things that you love are things that you should be happy to love, and that you should be able to really, pour yourself into, in healthy ways. And so, like, I think that for this, that was a pretty intentional thing with Michael Jordan. I grew up, in the '90s, and I was a Michael Jordan fan when they were losing to the Detroit Pistons year after year in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I used to cry when they would get eliminated from the playoffs. And I just remember the first year that they broke through the series against the Lakers, and Jordan did his up and under. It's just such, those are such precious memories to me. And so when this stuff happens with Michael Jordan, that is definitely a touch point where it's like, okay, like, hey, I know all about Michael Jordan. And so, wouldn't it be funny if in these, scenarios, these horrible, life-threatening scenarios, that this guy is just going on about a basketball player? And for me, it was a way to just inject some sports into something where a lot of times people kind of consider sports a little bit off limits, because all the memes about sports ball, and just all those things. It's like, no, you can like all of these things at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive.
I agree completely. I've seen quotes defining nerds as people who simply unabashedly, unashamedly love something. And the people I know, the big sports fans or just plain jocks, unabashedly love. And by that definition, are absolutely within the nerd umbrella,
That's why I just
media
like the
driven cultural
term.
stereotype.
I like the term fan, and of course, is coming from fanatic, and all of that, and being a fan is a core part of my identity. I am passionate. I love so many different kinds of things, and those things they've enriched my life and made my life, incredible. And so I can get just as excited when I am sitting in Toyota Field here in Huntsville watching the Rocket City Trash Pandas as our minor league baseball team. I can watch the Rocket City Trash Pandas and just, geek out at, watching that game, in the same way that I can, back, in, the early 2000s, or maybe wow, long time ago, when I'm waiting in line at GameStop to get Wrath of the Lich King to go home and install it as soon as I can. So those experiences to me are comparable, like that, like they are the same kind of thing, because it all comes from a place of loving what it is that you're currently doing. And I think you can be a fan of a variety of different things. And it's the same thing. My wife is a fan of many things. We have a Venn diagram naturally, as you can imagine, or we probably wouldn't be married. But there are lots and lots of things that she's a fan of that I don't understand why she's a fan of at all. But it's really been important to us. Like, we don't stomp on any of those things, because we recognize that being a fan is a magical thing, and it's okay to be fans of things that others, don't necessarily care for. Don't yuck someone else's yum.
And then you get the opportunity for them to very excitedly tell you about stuff and just to
That's
hear
it.
that. So, in that vein, Fallen Angel over Twitter mentioned that besides your love of Michael Jordan, comment of comics, and a person who lives in the South, as you just alluded to, how much do you have in common with Silas? Though we know everything, it's all the good stuff. We know it's all the good stuff.
None of the
But they
bad.
followed up with, what do you admire about this flagrant criminal?
Yeah, I think that the thing that I admire about Silas at this point, and I think this is important because if this had been asked before we were 22 episodes in, I probably would have had a different answer for Silas. I would have said something along the lines of, I will probably admire that he's not afraid to, jump in head first to a situation, and I think he has done that for sure. But I think that the thing that is becoming more apparent that I admire about him at this stage is just that ability, and it's very slight. Like let's not act like it's been just some complete about face or anything, but that ability to learn and grow and let others in. And this is the thing that I was not anticipating going into it. I knew that he was kind of a loner, but I thought that he would just kind of stay that way for much, much longer. And there are still those threads of that for sure. But I think that the people that he is with right now are kind of wearing on him, and it like in a good way. And I think he's coming to a level of trust in their abilities and their capability, all of those things that actually I admire. Because one of the things, a lot of people use this in a very bad way, but like the concept of a shark always swimming forward or otherwise they're going to sink, all those things. I think that there are some good lessons that you can take out of that. And I think that with that, with Silas, there was this concept of like, look, he's been churning water for a long time, living in this anonymity. Sure, he's running this giant comic shop, but is that really what? Does he really care about stuff more than people? Some of the subtle threads that are starting to come out there. But then at this stage, he saw this as an opportunity to just swim and not sink, and very shark like in that way. And I think that some of those edges are starting to soften, and he's starting to understand that he can rely on others. And honestly, that's happened way quicker than I, as a player, thought that would happen, but it has felt very natural. And so I would say that I really do admire that about him as a character. And these are things, of course, that as a human, Adam would love to think like, oh, I've learned these lessons many years ago. But there's still things that can remind me, and I can remind myself of those things. And again, this is why these games are truly magical, because those kind of things can happen, and I will think about it all night after the session, and I'm like, wait a minute, as an actual person, as a human, are there things that I've learned, like in the process of playing this make believe character? And so frequently that answer comes back of yes. And I do think it makes us better people.
That's fantastic. All right, we're just going to end this out with a question from Hope of the Valley. You might
Oh,
be
I know her.
familiar
Hey,
because
you know which valley she's talking about there, right? Like it is the Tennessee Valley, I think, anyway. Like unless she wants to correct us in chat here, but like Hope and I have a little bit of a Huntsville connection, and that is honestly, she lived here at least briefly at some point, and that was the reason I had a list of people that I was going to call to join what was the first Heroes of the Vale show here. And I saw that she had a Huntsville area code. And I was like, I'm going to call her first. And not because I was wanting to save on long distance charges, but because I was like, oh, I wonder. And sure enough, there was a Huntsville connection there. So didn't even know her before that. And she has become a very dear friend at this point.
Well, she also asks great questions, particularly of Silas, purveyor of nerdy goods. Maybe you could recommend for us what is Silas's favorite board game?
Board game. Wow. What a question. I would not be prepared for that one. You could have asked me almost any other kind of thing. I would say for board game, Silas is probably going to be a little older school with some of that. And I would imagine that Silas has a very well worn copy of Risk from many, many years ago that he used to play with his pops when he visited him. That he would think is probably the best thing, and he would probably say, many of the newer versions of Risk are too watered down, and you should go back to the original vintage Risk and play it, that you owe it to yourself.
And indeed, Risk is his business, but our business for the night is concluded. Don't forget to tune in here at Demiplane RPG next week for all of the magic you've heard about here on Children of Éarte. Thank you again so much, Adam. It is an absolute delight to have you. Please stay away from katanas.
So here's the other thing that I want to say,
Yeah.
because we have done an entire cycle through every member of the
Yeah.
cast now, and I am not completely certain that Sam, you have gotten to take a proper bow yet, but you have been absolutely killing it as the host of this show. Thank you so much for everything that you have done. Round of applause and all of the things. Thank you. And so chat, like, pour out some love there. Sam, they are the real deal. And so thank you, Sam.
Well, how dare you here on my own show? I suppose I have many more warnings for you, but you should all have someone in your life who hypes you up the way Adam Bradford does, and go see Adam Bradford doing things and creating beautiful collaborative magic next week on Children of Éarte. But until next time, we're going off the Éarte.
Later, Gators.